Heat check. Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa.
Welcome in to another episode of the Heat Check Hangout, your number one source for all things basketball, college. I'm your host, Brian Ralph, joined as always by my co-hosts Connor Hope and Riley Davis, here to break down the last week or so of action around the college basketball landscape. Guys, that we're going to get into a Feast Week preview and look ahead at Mount Invitational and all the other big tournaments that are going to be happening this week. It's probably too many to really make sure we cover all of them in depth. That's a conversation another day. Let it see more pushed to around Christmas, but we'll another topic for another day. But first, I want to touch on some of the bigger takeaways from the action we've seen again around the last week or so. And just talking before recording, we talk a lot about the WCC, this being a Gonzaga podcast or formerly Gonzaga podcast, but St. Mary's has gone from looking like a world beater, potential Final Four team, Connor, to being a not a joke in the college basketball world, but they've put forth some just absolutely horrid performances the last couple of games.
Yeah, they went up 16 on Weber State with 17 minutes left in that game, and they're averaging less than 1.2 points per minute since then, which is about 47.5 points per game. I tweeted this out to put that in perspective, and this is numbers for Houston on the season at the half against Dayton, and I don't know how many points in the second half Dayton scored against Houston. I don't have that in front of me, but at the half against Dayton, Houston, which is the number one ranked defense in the country and a bottom 60 pace of play team in the country in terms of slowest teams in the country, gives up about 49 points per game. So St. Mary's right now offensively is not even keeping pace with the opponents of the best defense in the country.
It's bad. It's bad, man.
It's awful.
And Raleigh, go ahead, Connor.
And I feel bad because it's like Mahaney can't do it. Like his numbers, I feel like, are artificially deflated in terms of his efficiency because it's now essentially him, Saxon, Jefferson, sometimes Dukas, sometimes like trying to score. They have four guys you can rely on to do anything offensively. And they're not, two of them, Jefferson and Dukas, aren't consistently efficient. Saxon can't shoot from three. Like he's going to do most of his damage inside. I mean, you're looking at a team where Mahaney was 0 of 9 to start the game tonight against Xavier, because it's like you can almost triple him and still hold St. Mary's to under 55 points a game at this point.
Riley, does this change the way you look at St. Mary's moving forward? It's early enough that we can write this off as a rough stretch, particularly with the way Mahaney is playing. And there are reasons for that aside from him not playing well, as Connor just mentioned. But you asked me a week ago, like I think some of the talk about St. Mary's being a dark horse Final Four team, like I could have bought into that. And now I'm totally out. Like I wrote in the Ralph Report last week that they're kind of the new Tennessee for me, where their offense just limits how good they can be. But it might not even be a limitation. The offense might just make them bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really see, it's still too early to write them off completely, but I don't see how you could feel remotely optimistic about it. Like, I don't see why you would even say, like, I'm still betting on them to make the tournament. I mean, they've already fallen from 38 to 74 on KenPom. You look at the offensive numbers on their KenPom page, it's all red, all like sub 280 and 300s. Even looking at like beyond Ada Mahaney, you look at the numbers of Augustus Marcialonis, who's another guy who I think people sort of expected him to make a leap. Like he was a pretty highly touted recruiter, well-regarded recruit, I should say, coming out of Lithuania. I have some real boots on the ground over in Eastern Europe to back that up, but not really. But his production so far, like he had 14 against Xavier, but before that, 0 points, 4 points, like 9 points. Like that's not really going to get it done, especially if you're supposed to be the backcourt mate to Mahaney. If you're supposed to be able to follow in that long line of St. Mary's having, like, St. Mary's, for as slow paced as their offense is, I feel like they have a pretty good history over the past half decade, maybe even longer, of having good guards, and it's really just Mahaney and a bunch of nobodies right now.
It is, and that I think that's what sticks out when you watch them, because they haven't necessarily had a lot of dynamic individual playmakers in the past, right? The offensive system is enough to get some stuff out of there, and that's what they go off of. It's Virginia-esque in that kind of sense. But it is painful watching them when you realize that it doesn't look like anybody can make a play outside of structure. Like, just like they're running shell drill over and over and over again, but the offensive side of it, which is not what the drill is designed to do. So it's like, I don't know how it gets better. I know that it will. Bennett's too good of a coach. This team is too talented overall for them to not pick it up. But like, at some point, it's like, okay, you just are what you are, and it's not what we thought or hoped it would be with this team, who was returning a lot of talent from a team that was really, really good last year.
Mm-hmm. As soon as you started saying Bennett's a really good coach, I just heard Bennett and thought you were going to have an anecdote about your son that made you optimistic about St. Mary's turning it around, but it took a pretty quick turn.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably as effective offensively as some of those guys right now. A 2-year-old self running around.
Bennett's got a bag, man.
And it's not just the offense either. Their defense, which had ranked top 10 last year, top 12 in 22, 13 in 21, right now is 46th on Ken Palm. They're giving up buckets at a higher rate. They're not turning the ball over. They're not getting at the defensive glasses as much. Losing Logan Johnson is a huge part of that, because Mahaney, Marshallonis, Jordan Ross, the other guards on this roster just aren't the same defenders on the perimeter that Logan Johnson was. Take away the offense, but they gave up 61 points to Weber State, but again, Weber State's comeback came almost exclusively in that second half. They were trailing by 16 with 17 minutes left. Weber State was. They gave up 79 points to, again, a San Diego State team whose offense has struggled as well this year. And then 66 points to Xavier, which, Xavier's going to put up points, but they're also a team that is coming into this year and is likely going to spend the entire year without two of their best, if not their two best players on the roster. So this defense, like, to call them Tennessee, I think is an insult to what Tennessee was the past couple of years.
Yes.
Because Tennessee's defense at least was top 10 consistently,
right,
if not top 3. This St. Mary's defense isn't there.
Well, that's how I think this week changes the conversation around St. Mary's, right? Because you had the loss to Weber State, and you're okay, bad half, right? But we still know this team, from an identity standpoint, is going to be great defensively. Their offense is just going to lend itself to having games like this. But now it's not a game like this. It's a consistent level of play, and that changes the conversation about what we're having right now. Now, there were two teams that lost, ranked teams that lost to unranked teams this weekend as well. Arkansas lost at home to UNC Greensboro. I just had the other one pulled up.
Michigan, who was ranked in the Heat Check poll. I think they made it in their poll.
Oh, in our poll. No.
Oh, so FAU. You're right.
Yeah, it's 2 top 25 teams, 2 top 15 teams that lost to unranked foes this weekend. We had Arkansas lose at home to UNC Greensboro, and we had top 10 FAU lose at home to Bryant. Just from a standpoint, Riley, looking at FAU and looking at Arkansas, does the result concern you for either team?
Yeah, for both, actually. And this would tie in, looking at overall takeaways from the second week of college basketball. It was hard making a top 25 this week. Like, we do our Heat Check polls they come out on Sundays, and I got to my top 10, and after that I'm like, dude, I have no idea. And especially once I got to 20, I was like, well, BYU has beaten San Diego State and a bunch of Sean Paul All-Stars, so I guess I'll sprinkle them in there at 21. It's there's so many teams that, Arkansas, I know, you bring them up, a month ago they started popping up in Final Four lists after what they did to Purdue. Like, they looked so good. It looked like shooting wouldn't be a problem, which was their big concern. And honestly, I think that's like what would shock me the most if I was an Arkansas fan is their shooting has largely been good so far. I want to say they're over 40% from three as a team. Caliph Battle, he's been really solid from beyond the arc after being streaky throughout his career at Temple. You're getting decent production from Tremont Mark, who was never a shooter at Houston, but it's like the defense has like really fallen off recently, whether it was against Old Dominion or UNC Greensboro. It's like the toughness and the like even the ability to control the glass that we've come to see characterize some Musselman teams that just played sound defense. It's not there right now. Now, luckily, I will say that I'm of the belief that defense is something that you can improve upon and should progress over the years, especially with the team, over the year, especially with a team like Arkansas that's bringing in so many new pieces. You'd expect to see better communication. You'd expect to see better buy-in as the non-con goes on. But I'm just looking at some of these whether it's the loss or the close wins, where it's like they're sort of squandering this hot shooting start that might not be sustainable.
That's true. Now, Connor, I know when we talk about Arkansas, we know that there might be slip-ups like this. There have been in the past. Maybe not to this extent that's alarming. Does anything about Arkansas, the result of UNC Greensboro, concern you? Or should there be alarm bells going off for FAU?
I'm not throwing up alarm bells for either team. I dropped both teams back in my top 25. Arkansas, I think, is at 23. FAU is still at 17, I think, for me. Arkansas, I don't have many concerns in the long run, just because we know this Arkansas team is prone to look bad for games or stretches until February, and then really it's how is Arkansas playing in February that you have to pay attention to when it comes to that team. FAU, it was rough. It was a rough game. But to put it in context, and I tweeted this out, FAU has played this core, because it's the same core as last year, has played 43 games together. They shot 34% from 2-point range and 16.7% from deep in their loss. Since the start of last year, they had only one game where they shot under 45% from two and under 30% from three in the same game, and just three total where they shot under 50% from two and under 35% from three in the same game. So to me, this FAU performance, unless it continues, and I said the same thing about St. Mary's after the Weber State loss, because when I was watching it, I was like, it was an 8-point slump. Like, that's tough to win. Let's see how they do moving forward. For me with FAU, I'm not pushing the alarm bell until it happens, a couple more times over the next stretch of games, because you can easily look at this, especially with Elijah Martin still kind of coming back off his injury. You can look at this and go, this is kind of an aberration. Like, it's a really tough shooting performance. It's going to and should hurt their resume. But in terms of how good I think FAU is and can be, is this going to make me worry? Probably not, unless it happens again.
I agree with Connor that it's probably going to be an aberration, but I just want to be a little hot takey for the moment and like overreact, because like, consider this about the Owls. Like, they scored 51 points at home against Bryant. Like, come on, they didn't break. Yeah. They didn't break 55 at home against a team that's historically like sub 250 defensively that just lost their coach. I mean, maybe they were juiced up by Phil Martelli Jr. and not having, you want to shoot Jumpas himself like on the sideline, like rallying around this interim guy. But I'm just like, I agree. Like, ultimately it's going to be, one off, and you even look at them dropping 100 points a couple days before at Eastern Michigan, which granted is Eastern Michigan, but still, like, they